If you're into chilling true crime stories that shake you to your core, you're in the right place. What you're about to hear isn't just another crime story. It's a tragic, real-life nightmare that ripped through Italy and left everyone questioning how love can turn so deadly. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives like this. On the evening of November 11th, 2023, a bright 22-year-old biomedical engineering student named Giulia Cecchettin vanished. She had gone out with her ex-boyfriend, Filippo Toretta, to a shopping center near Venice. They shared a casual dinner, laughing and talking, completely unaware that the night would end in unimaginable horror. Giulia even paid for both their meals, a small act that showed the generosity everyone who knew her admired. That night, she sent one last message to her sister. It was the last sign of life anyone would ever receive from her. Hours later, the peace was shattered. A witness reported a violent argument in a car park, just a few hundred meters from Giulia's home. A woman's chilling scream echoed through the night. Help was called, but the police were trapped by other emergencies, delaying their arrival. In those terrifying moments, Giulia was left entirely vulnerable. The nightmare was just beginning. Days later, surveillance footage from a nearby industrial area revealed a scene of pure horror. The video showed Giulia being struck violently by her ex-boyfriend, Filippo. She tried to escape, but every step was met with brutal, overwhelming force. In a moment that's now frozen in time, he lifted her bleeding, defenseless body and forced her into the trunk of his car before speeding away. As news of Giulia's disappearance spread, Italy was gripped by fear and outrage. A nationwide manhunt for Filippo was launched as he fled the country. People were heartbroken, and everyone wondered, how could someone plan such a thing against a person they once claimed to love? A week later, the search came to a devastating end. Rescuers discovered Giulia's body in a remote cave. The autopsy revealed a shocking truth: dozens of stab wounds, many of them defensive. She had fought for her life with everything she had, but the violence had been relentless and merciless. While Italy mourned, the international search for Filippo intensified. He was finally apprehended, not in Italy, but across the border in Germany. His car had run out of fuel. When the authorities reached him, he confessed without hesitation. He admitted that the entire act had been premeditated. He revealed a terrifying level of planning. He had studied her routines, acquired weapons, and even plotted his escape route. He kept a list, coldly preparing for every single step of the murder. The trial sent shockwaves across Europe. The verdict was life imprisonment, a sentence that reflected the sheer cruelty and premeditation of his actions. But even as justice was served, haunting questions lingered in the courtroom. How could someone meticulously plan the murder of a woman they claimed to love? What warning signs were missed? Could anything have brought Giulia back? Her death ignited massive protests across Italy. Thousands of people mourned her loss, and her sister became a powerful voice, demanding a society that no longer turns a blind eye to violence against women. Yet, beneath the grief, a chilling truth remained. This was not a crime of passion. It was something far darker, an obsession that had been silently growing, just waiting for the perfect moment to explode. What drove Filippo to plan such a horrific act? What moments? What signs went unnoticed until it was too late? And could anyone have intervened to save Giulia? The answers are deeply disturbing, far more than you might imagine. Before the night that changed everything, Giulia Cecchettin's future was a brilliant horizon. She was a gifted biomedical engineering student, radiating a warmth and intelligence that drew people in. Her friends remember a young woman who could fill a room with her laughter, whose kindness was a constant, gentle force. She was the kind of person who seemed destined for great things. Then there was Filippo Toretta, her ex-boyfriend. On the surface, he was charismatic, confident, almost magnetic. But beneath this polished exterior, a darker, controlling nature was beginning to show. Their relationship started with the passion and intensity of young love, full of whispered promises and shared dreams for the future. Giulia, full of hope, saw a man capable of deep affection. Filippo, however, saw someone he could possess, someone whose world he could mold to fit his own. The first signs were subtle, easy to brush aside. A sharp, critical tone in his voice, a passing jealous remark. Friends started noticing that Giulia would seem anxious after phone calls with him, but she kept her worries private. She wanted to believe in the man she loved, the one who once told her she was his entire world. But as their relationship started to unravel, the small cracks grew into dangerous fissures. Love, she was learning, was not a shield against his growing obsession. The arguments became more frequent, his temper more volatile. One day, a minor disagreement over her plans to attend a seminar abroad escalated alarmingly. He cornered her in her apartment, his voice rising, fists clenched, intimidating her into silence. The immediate danger passed, but a quiet, heavy fear took root, influencing her every move. Her friends saw the warning signs. They told her he wasn't right for her, that he was dangerous when he didn't get his way. But Giulia was caught in a storm of conflicting emotions: love, guilt, and a lingering hope that she could either fix him or simply endure. She tried to end things several times, but each time, he would win her back with tearful apologies and grand promises to change. By late 2023, she had finally ended the relationship for good. Or so she believed. For Giulia, it was closure. For Filippo, it was an unbearable wound. He couldn't let go. His heartbreak twisted into obsession. He began stalking her, relentlessly tracking her social media, showing up unexpectedly at places he knew she would be. The stalking grew more intense, a constant, menacing presence in her life. Giulia's family, especially her sister Elena, grew deeply concerned. They begged her to be careful, to document everything, to trust her gut. Giulia, while cautious, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, balancing her studies and her friendships against the storm cloud that now followed her everywhere. She didn't know that behind his facade of calm, Filippo was meticulously planning his revenge. He was withdrawing cash, researching escape routes, and calculating every single detail. The man who once spoke of love was now consumed by a need for control, possession, and ultimately, destruction. The night of November 11th was not a random act of passion. It was the horrifying climax of months of calculated obsession. He knew her schedule, where she would be, and what she was likely to do. Every small detail had been woven into his terrible plan. That evening, Giulia went out, smiling and vibrant, unaware of how close the danger was. She even paid for both of their meals, walking unknowingly into a trap that had been set with chilling precision. The ordinary streets of Margaro were about to become the stage for an unimaginable horror. The person she had once loved most was about to become the agent of her death. Their shared past, their love, their memories, all had been twisted into a weapon that Filippo would use with cold deliberation. Her desperate attempts to escape, her fight to survive, were met with a brutality that exposed the terrifying depth of his obsession. As the sun set over Venice that night, a storm had already claimed a life. For those who loved Giulia, a haunting question remains. How could a relationship that started with so much promise spiral into such absolute darkness? The answers would emerge in the days that followed, revealing a chilling story of control, obsession, and the deadly consequences of a love that was never really love at all. The night of November 11th, 2023, started out just like any other. The streets were quiet, traffic hummed in the distance, and neon lights reflected off the wet pavement. But for Giulia Cecchettin, this night would be her last. It was the final, tragic act in a story that had been building for months. She had agreed to meet her ex-boyfriend, Filippo, one last time. Her friends said she just wanted closure, a final conversation to officially end their complicated relationship. She had no way of knowing that Filippo had something else entirely planned, a meticulously orchestrated nightmare. He showed up looking calm and composed, his usual charm hiding the storm raging inside him. Every word, every gesture, was calculated to lure her into the trap he had carefully set. Their conversation started with polite, awkward small talk. The laughter felt forced, and the smiles never quite reached their eyes. The tension in the air was so thick you could feel it. A small disagreement started to escalate, almost without notice. A sharp remark here, a defensive look there, until the fragile peace between them shattered completely. In the parking lot of a local shopping center, the argument exploded. Witnesses would later report hearing a piercing, frantic scream that would haunt them. Giulia tried to get away. She turned toward her car, her heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through her. But Filippo was right behind her. His movements were swift, precise, and terrifyingly deliberate. He struck her. The sudden blow sent her sprawling to the ground. She tried to fight back, but he met her resistance with even more force. In those terrifying moments, the vibrant young woman known for her bright laughter and warmth was trapped, vulnerable in the grip of someone who once claimed to love her. Minutes felt like an eternity. Every second was a desperate struggle for survival. Giulia's screams echoed in the cold night air, but no one came to help. No one intervened. Filippo, consumed by his obsession and rage, had planned for this. He dragged her to his car as her resistance grew weaker with every step. The trunk closed, plunging her into darkness as the world outside faded into muffled noise. From that moment, a horrifying chain of events was set in motion. Filippo drove away from the city, away from the lights, heading toward the industrial areas and isolated roads he had scouted just days before. Surveillance cameras captured fleeting, chilling glimpses of their journey, her desperate attempts to escape, his relentless pursuit, the cold, calculated nature of his actions. This was a premeditated crime, a horrifying display of obsession turned lethal. Meanwhile, Giulia's disappearance sparked panic. When hours passed with no word from her, her friends and family knew something was terribly wrong. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. Her sister, Elena, was the first to grasp the gravity of the situation. She called the authorities, describing every detail she could remember, every recent interaction with Filippo, every concern Giulia had shared. A search was launched immediately, but precious time was already slipping away. The manhunt intensified. Police scoured the streets, reviewed surveillance footage, and alerted border authorities. But Filippo seemed to have vanished, leaving behind a trail of fear and uncertainty. Every move he made was deliberate, every step planned to evade capture. His obsession had become a strategic operation, and the authorities were in a race against time. Then came the discovery that would send shockwaves across Italy. Giulia's body, hidden in a remote cave, was found after days of desperate searching. The scene revealed the unimaginable brutality she had endured. Her life had been violently taken, her body bearing the marks of her struggle and his calculated rage. The news horrified the nation, igniting urgent conversations about the vulnerability of women, the nature of obsession, and the warning signs that are so often missed until it's too late. When Filippo was finally caught in Germany, it felt like the closing of a dark, nightmarish chapter. His confession was cold and unrepentant. He detailed the premeditation and planning, leaving investigators and the public struggling to comprehend the horrifying clarity of his intentions. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was obsession, meticulously executed. Italy mourned, but questions lingered. How could someone orchestrate such a monstrous act without anyone noticing? How could the love that once drew Giulia to him become so twisted, so dark, and so final? Her death became a stark reminder that danger often hides behind a familiar face, that obsession can disguise itself as affection, and that we must remain vigilant. The investigation peeled back layer after layer, revealing the chilling steps Filippo took to cover his tracks: falsified messages, calculated routes, and a cold, methodical approach to a crime that stunned a nation. Every detail painted a portrait of a man who allowed his fixation to completely eclipse his humanity. Even in the face of such a tragedy, Giulia's story became a symbol, not of weakness, but of the warning signs we can no longer afford to ignore. It highlighted the importance of speaking up and the desperate need to confront the darkness that can lurk behind seemingly ordinary relationships. Her vibrant and promising life was taken far too soon, but the impact of her story will resonate for years to come, a chilling lesson in love, obsession, and the terrifying potential of human darkness. The morning after Giulia's disappearance, an eerie quiet settled over the streets of Margara. News of the missing student spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of fear, grief, and anger across the region. Friends and family flooded the local police station with tips, desperate for any clue that could bring her home. But the trail was cold. It had been carefully erased by Filippo, who always seemed to be one step ahead. Authorities launched a massive manhunt. Roadblocks sprung up on highways. Checkpoints were set at border crossings, and every surveillance camera in the region was scoured for a sign of Filippo and his car. Witness statements painted a terrifyingly clear picture of the attack in the parking lot, but no one saw the final moments before Giulia was forced into the vehicle. Every hour that passed without contact intensified the public's dread, and the media coverage amplified the tension to a fever pitch. Across Italy, families began to fear the worst. Filippo's calculated evasion was chilling. He avoided main roads, traveled under the cover of darkness, and meticulously planned his route across northern Italy and into Austria. Every move he made suggested foresight, a cold, methodical mind that had turned obsession into a deadly strategy. Investigators quickly realized this wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. This was a crime that had been planned down to the last detail, from the first blow to the final, horrifying disappearance. Meanwhile, Giulia's family was trapped in an agony of uncertainty. Her sister, Elena, heartbroken but resolute, became the public face of their grief. In powerful media interviews, she pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. She urged the public to recognize the warning signs of abuse and obsession, her raw, emotional words striking a chord with the entire nation. Days bled into a week, each one heavier than the last. The search expanded. Volunteers, search dogs, and drones combed through forests and remote industrial areas. Police issued an alert across Europe. Social media became a tool for mobilization, with countless posts tracking sightings and pleading for information. Still, Filippo remained a ghost. Then, a breakthrough. A hiker in the Friuli region, near Lake Barsis, stumbled upon a large nylon bag hidden inside a cave. When authorities arrived, the horrifying truth was undeniable. Giulia's life had been violently stolen. The autopsy revealed dozens of stab wounds, some defensive, some fatal, confirming the sheer brutality of the attack. The nation's collective grief exploded into outrage. As the investigation deepened, authorities pieced together Filippo's movements. They found evidence of premeditation, cash withdrawals, items purchased that suggested preparation for violence, and a carefully plotted escape route. Each discovery revealed the depth of his obsession and the coldness of his calculation. The man who had professed his love had meticulously orchestrated her murder. The pursuit intensified, crossing international borders. Finally, Filippo was spotted in Germany, on the Autobahn. He had run out of fuel, stranded, and unaware that law enforcement was closing in. When the police approached him, he made a chilling admission: "I killed Giulia." He offered no hesitation, no remorse, only a stark acknowledgement of the life he had taken. The confession sent shockwaves across Italy and beyond. This was the story of a young woman's life, brutally ended by someone who once claimed to love her. The investigation painted a grim picture of obsession, jealousy, and control, and the horrifying consequences when warning signs are ignored. The trial that followed was watched across Europe. Prosecutors laid out a case detailing every calculated move Filippo made, emphasizing premeditation, kidnapping, and the concealment of a body. The defense tried to argue it was a crime of passion, but the evidence was overwhelming. This was the end result of obsession turned into a meticulous plan. Public reaction was fierce. Vigils were held in Giulia's memory. Protests demanded stronger laws to protect women. Giulia became more than a victim. She became a symbol of awareness, courage, and the urgent need to confront the darkness that can hide within relationships. Her story forced a nation to ask uncomfortable questions. How many more Giulias are out there? How many warnings go unnoticed? And how can society stop obsession from turning lethal? As Filippo awaited his fate, Italy remained haunted by the memory of Giulia, a bright, promising life extinguished far too soon, and a society left to confront the harsh reality of love turned deadly. In a packed Italian courtroom, the nation held its breath. Giulia Cecchettin's family sat at the front, their faces a mask of grief, as Filippo Toretta, the man accused of her murder, entered. He was composed, cold, his eyes empty of emotion. This was the man who once claimed to love her, now a chilling figure of calculated cruelty. The prosecution began, laying out the grim timeline. Witnesses described screams in a parking lot, an argument that spiraled into horror. Then came the security footage, a silent, damning record from industrial zones and dark streets. It showed that Filippo hadn't acted in a blind rage. Every move, every decision that night was meticulously planned. He lured Giulia, trapped her, and carried out a crime horrifying in its precision. The most difficult evidence was about Giulia's final moments. Autopsy photos, though not shown to the public, were described in court. They revealed defensive wounds, multiple stab marks, signs of a desperate struggle. The court heard how she fought for her life with every ounce of her strength, a testament to her incredible courage against overwhelming force. The narrative painted a devastating portrait of a young woman, vibrant and full of dreams, stolen from the world. Filippo's defense tried to argue it was a crime of passion, an act of overwhelming emotion. But the evidence told a starkly different story. Investigators detailed his methodical planning, the cash he withdrew, the materials he purchased, how he tracked Giulia's routines, and his carefully plotted escape. Even the international manhunt that followed showed a mind thinking steps ahead, executing each part of his horrific plan. Friends and family took the stand, their voices heavy with sorrow. They spoke of Filippo's controlling behavior, his jealousy, the warning signs that had been there all along. They recounted moments when Giulia had expressed fear for her safety, times she tried to distance herself from the man she once loved. Each testimony added to the undeniable conclusion: this was not a sudden act, but a deliberate, premeditated murder. The prosecution revealed how Filippo tried to manipulate the narrative after the fact, attempting to erase his digital footprint, and how he had researched methods to commit the crime and evade capture. For everyone in that courtroom, the realization was sickening. The man they thought they knew, who had been a part of Giulia's life, had methodically planned her death. When Filippo was finally asked to explain his motives, the courtroom fell into a stunned silence. In an almost casual, detached tone, he admitted he couldn't accept that their relationship was over. His obsession, he said, had consumed him. He then recounted, step by step, his own planning, revealing a chilling disconnect from basic humanity. The verdict, when it came, was swift and decisive. Life imprisonment. No possibility of parole. The judge cited the premeditation, the kidnapping, the concealment of her body, and the sheer brutality of the crime. Justice, in its most absolute form, had been served. Outside, Italy reacted. Vigils sprung up in cities across the country, candles flickering in memory of a life cut short. Social media overflowed with tributes to Giulia, and her story became a powerful catalyst for a national conversation about violence against women and the dangers of obsession. But even with the trial over, profound questions remain. How does such a calculating person go undetected? How did Giulia, so intelligent and aware, become a victim of someone she once trusted? And the most haunting question of all, how many others are living in the shadow of a similar danger, unaware that the person they love could become their greatest threat? The trial of Filippo Turetta has ended, but the echo of Giulia Cecchettin's story continues. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about obsession, control, and the fragility of life. Her light was extinguished far too soon, but her story, her courage, and the lessons from her tragic death will never be forgotten. The world watched, horrified and heartbroken, as the story of Giulia Cecchettin unfolded. But the aftermath of her death was more than just grief. It became a reckoning, a call to confront the darkness that often hides behind love, charm, and familiarity. As Italy mourned, it also demanded change. Vigils and protests filled the streets, candlelight reflecting off tear-streaked faces, each one silently pledging that Giulia's story would not be forgotten. Her family, shattered but resilient, channeled their immense pain into advocacy. Her sister, Elena, spoke to reporters with a quiet intensity, urging young women and men to recognize the warning signs of obsessive behavior and to take any threat seriously. Giulia's story, while devastating, became a powerful symbol, not just of loss, but of awareness, courage, and the urgent need to prevent such tragedies from ever happening again. Filippo Turetta, the man responsible, was sentenced to life imprisonment. He became a cautionary tale for the world to see. The court records, his confessions, and the meticulously documented evidence painted a chilling portrait of a man consumed by obsession, a man whose love had twisted into the world watched, horrified and heartbroken, as the story of Giulia Cecchettin unfolded. But the aftermath of her death was more than just grief. It became a reckoning, a call to confront the darkness that often hides behind love, charm, and familiarity. As Italy mourned, it also demanded change. Vigils and protests filled the streets, candlelight reflecting off tear-streaked faces, each one silently pledging that Giulia's story would not be forgotten. Her family, shattered but resilient, channeled their immense pain into advocacy. Her sister, Elena, spoke to reporters with a quiet intensity, urging young women and men to recognize the warning signs of obsessive behavior and to take any threat seriously. Giulia's story, while devastating, became a powerful symbol, not just of loss, but of awareness, courage, and the urgent need to prevent such tragedies from ever happening again. Filippo Torretta, the man responsible, was sentenced to life imprisonment. He became a cautionary tale for the world to see. The court records, his confessions, and the meticulously documented evidence painted a chilling portrait of a man consumed by obsession, a man whose love had twisted into a toxic need for possession, which then erupted into rage and murder. In prison, he would face the reality of a life he destroyed and a life he cruelly stole from Giulia. But even as justice was served, haunting questions lingered in the public mind. How could someone plan such a brutal act and evade detection for so long? Toxic need for possession, which then erupted into rage and murder. In prison, he would face the reality of a life he destroyed and a life he cruelly stole from Giulia. But even as justice was served, haunting questions lingered in the public mind. How could someone plan such a brutal act and evade detection for so long? How many others are living under the radar in similar obsessive relationships, trapped in a silent state of fear? And the most difficult question of all, how often do we overlook the subtle signs until it's far, far too late? This case sparked a massive national conversation in Italy about femicide, domestic abuse. How many others are living under the radar in similar obsessive relationships, trapped in a silent state of fear? And the most difficult question of all, how often do we overlook the subtle signs until it's far, far too late? This case sparked a massive national conversation in Italy about femicide, domestic abuse, and the systemic changes needed to protect vulnerable individuals. In response, Italy introduced stricter laws, launched new awareness campaigns, and expanded support systems, all determined that Giulia's story would ignite lasting reform rather than just fade into forgotten headlines. Her name became a symbol of vigilance, of resilience, and of the fight against the quiet but deadly force and the systemic changes needed to protect vulnerable individuals. In response, Italy introduced stricter laws, launched new awareness campaigns, and expanded support systems, all determined that Giulia's story would ignite lasting reform rather than just fade into forgotten headlines. Her name became a symbol of vigilance, of resilience, and of the fight against the quiet but deadly force of obsession. Yet, the story also reminds us, chillingly, of human fragility. A young woman, full of life, hope, and ambition, was torn from the world by someone she had once trusted. Every moment of her life, every smile, every laugh, every choice she made, it all ended in an of obsession. Yet, the story also reminds us, chillingly, of human fragility. A young woman, full of life, hope, and ambition, was torn from the world by someone she had once trusted. Every moment of her life, every smile, every laugh, every choice she made, it all ended in an act of violence that seemed unimaginable until it happened. And that is the cruel, terrifying truth of real-life horror. It doesn't announce itself in advance. It strikes in a single moment, irreversible and merciless. For those of us who follow true crime stories, Giulia's case is more than just another act of violence that seemed unimaginable until it happened. And that is the cruel, terrifying truth of real-life horror. It doesn't announce itself in advance. It strikes in a single moment, irreversible and merciless. For those of us who follow true crime stories, Giulia's case is more than just another headline. It's a visceral, heartbreaking lesson about love, obsession, and the hidden shadows that can exist behind the people we think we know. It is a story that demands our attention, our reflection, and a willingness to act before another tragedy strikes. Her memory lives on, in the streets where she once laughed, in the hearts of those who loved her, and in the relentless pursuit of justice in her name. But most of all, her story echoes a critical warning across time and borders. Never ignore the signs. Never dismiss fear, whether it's your own or someone else's. And never assume that love can't turn deadly. Remember Giulia's headline. It's a visceral, heartbreaking lesson about love, obsession, and the hidden shadows that can exist behind the people we think we know. It is a story that demands our attention, our reflection, and a willingness to act before another tragedy strikes. Her memory lives on, in the streets where she once laughed, in the hearts of those who loved her, and in the relentless pursuit of justice in her name. But most of all, her story echoes a critical warning across time and borders. Never ignore the signs. Never dismiss fear, whether it's your own or someone else's. And never assume that love can't turn deadly. Remember Giulia Cecchettin. Share her story. Talk about it with your friends and family. Protect those around you. Awareness is the first step towards prevention. If you want more real-life stories that reveal the darkest corners of human behavior, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Giulia's light was extinguished far too soon, but her story can serve as a tragic reminder that while love can be beautiful, obsession can be lethal. If you want more real-life stories that reveal the darkest corners of human behavior, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Giulia's light was extinguished far too soon, but her story can serve as a tragic reminder that while love can be beautiful, obsession can be lethal. Thank you for watching.